Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're going to dive into a pretty intense text from the 18th century. It's all about confronting one of life's biggest certainties, and really what that can teach us about how we live our lives right now.
It all starts with this really profound verse from the book of Job. This one line became the cornerstone for a whole meditation on mortality, written by a Scottish minister, a guy named Thomas Boston, way back almost 300 years ago.
Okay, so the language might feel a little old school, right? It's from another era. But the reality it's talking about, that's completely timeless. It really forces us to look, directly, without flinching, at the one destination we all share.
But look, the point here isn't to scare anybody, not at all. It's really to ask, what can we actually learn from confronting this reality head-on? What wisdom is in there? So let's dive in and see what this old text has to offer us.
All right, Section 1, the house for all. So Boston kicks things off by completely reframing how we think about our final destination. He doesn't see it as just an end. He sees it as a kind of home.
And this is the central idea, the main metaphor of the whole thing, the grave as the house appointed for all. The thinking here is that this isn't some strange foreign place. No, it's our true home, our everlasting dwelling, the place we're all ultimately meant to be.
And to really make this point stick, the text draws this super sharp contrast. Think about it. Our life on Earth, that's presented as just a temporary stay. Like you're lodging at an inn for a night. You're just passing through. But the grave, that's our permanent residence. It's the home we've been journeying toward this whole time.
And you've got to notice the emphasis on that word all. It's absolutely crucial. This isn't a choice. It's not a maybe. It's presented as a divine appointment, an unbreakable law. And it applies to every single one of us. Doesn't matter if you're rich, powerful, young, or old. Okay, so moving into Section 2, an unbreakable law. This part really builds on that idea, and it lays out this very structured, almost legal argument for why death is an absolute, totally unshakable certainty. The core idea here? Well, it couldn't be simpler. Everyone must die. But to make sure this point is impossible to ignore, Boston doesn't just say it, he actually sets out to prove it, using 4 totally distinct lines of reasoning.
It's almost like he's a lawyer building a case, right? He argues from 4 different angles. First up, he pulls from Scripture what he calls a divine decree. Second, he points to just simple observation, what we see around us every day. Third, he looks at the very nature of our physical bodies. And finally, he brings in a theological view of the human soul.
And to highlight that proof from observation, he asks this really powerful rhetorical question. The point is, the world is constantly making room for new generations. And that's because death is constantly clearing the way. The grave, as he puts it, is never full.
The text also really emphasizes the sheer fragility of life. Our bodies are called houses of clay. And get this, it notes that something as tiny as a stone in a raisin could be enough to end a life. It's wild, and this leads to a pretty startling thought. Maybe the fact that we survive from one day to the next is actually more amazing than the fact that we eventually die.
Okay, Section 3, life, a fleeting vanity. So, if we accept that death is absolutely certain, where does that leave life? Well, the text turns its attention right there, to the nature of the life that comes before death. And it describes it with one single, powerful, and honestly, often misunderstood word.
So let's talk about that word, vanity. This is super important. When the text calls life vanity, it doesn't just mean being arrogant or prideful. Nope, it's using the word in its older original sense, meaning something that lacks substance, something fleeting or insubstantial. It's saying life is like a dream that just vanishes when you wake up, or like a shadow that has no solid form.
And this idea, this perspective, gets applied to our entire lifespan. Childhood, that's seen as a time of trivial pleasures. Youth, a fleeting bloom of foolishness. Middle age becomes this cloud of worries and challenges. And old age, well, that brings infirmities, labor, and sorrow. So from this viewpoint, every single stage of life is just a different flavor of that same fleeting vanity.
And to really hammer home just how brief this life is, the text does something pretty clever. It systematically shrinks the way we measure it. It starts with hundreds of years, then brings it down to scores of years, then months, then days, until finally our entire lifespan is described as being as nothing when you put it up against the scale of eternity.
And to help us feel that speed, not just think about it, it uses these incredibly vivid, poetic images. For example, our days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. That little wooden tool that just flies back and forth across a loom at an incredible speed.
Then there's this one. Our time on Earth is like swift ships. Ships that sail night and day, they never pause, they're just always relentlessly moving toward their final port. It's such a powerful image of constant, unstoppable motion, isn't it?
And then this last image, wow. It really captures the urgent rush of life toward its end. It's not just a steady journey anymore. It's a final, focused dive, as the eagle that hasteth to the prey. Just imagine that, an eagle swooping down with breathtaking speed. That's the idea.
Which brings us to Section 4, Lessons from the Grave. So after all that, what's the takeaway? What's the point? Well, after establishing that death is certain and life is fleeting, the text argues that this whole somber perspective, it isn't meant to paralyze us with fear, not at all. It's meant to radically transform how we actually live.
So this awareness is really presented as a practical tool, something you can use for a more focused life. The idea is it can help you see the world's treasures for what they really are. It can help you find contentment and patience when things get tough. It can restrain that pride, those worldly desires. And maybe most importantly, it can motivate you to prepare for what comes next, to really think about what matters.
And to really drive this point home, the text uses this incredible historical story. It's about the great Sultan Saladin. So when he was on his deathbed, he told his standard bearer to take his burial shroud, just a simple piece of linen, and display it for everyone, saying that of all his triumphs, all his power and wealth, that was all he had left to take with him, just that one piece of linen.
Because ultimately, that's what this house appointed for all is. It's the great equalizer. Inside its walls, all those distinctions that seem so incredibly important in this life, wealth, status, power, they're just gone, erased. The small and the great, the servant and the master, they're all there together, totally equal.
And so this 300-year-old meditation leaves us with one final, really piercing question. It asks you to look at everything you've provided, all the things you work for, all the stuff you accumulate, and just consider, and who shall those things be? In the end, when you arrive at that house appointed for all, what happens to it all? It's a question that's really designed to make us all stop and reflect on what it is we're truly building, and what, if anything, will actually last.